Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on April 24, 2017, this is a second closed meeting. To the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during the closed meeting. Moved by Mrs. Strauss and seconded by Mr. McGilvin. All those in favor, raise your hand. The vote is unanimous with a couple of board members not present. With that, where's Mr. Fairfax? Okay, so we are continuing ERFC discussion that if there's a further questions, but I need to just alert my board members that in 10 minutes, that somebody else will continue managing this portion of ERFC, then I'm going to have to pack up and do something else. Please excuse me at that point. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
I have a question, and I don't know who is best situated to answer it, but a clarifying question. Has the school system or the county ever introduced a policy change to the pension funds and made it applicable to the existing employee base as far as changing eligibility requirements or and if so, what is the what's the precedent? And additionally, have you run models to, because I tend to think that we do a lot of decision making without having run the financial models to determine what the likelihood of losing employees is based on the concept that we are changing something that we've already made a commitment to them. And so have you run attrition models based on any changes to the ERFC?
The response to the last question, any attrition models, we have not. And then the last significant changes we made to ERFC was in 2001. So our current plan, called ERFC 2001, was going forward for the new employees that started, was it July 1, 2001? Mm-hmm.
That's a similar approach as the county has done in the past as well as. So it's different than what's proposed here with having the A and B groups.
That's correct. I believe when VRS made a change one time, they might have had a slight change there, but when county makes a change and the last changes we made for school system, it's always been for the new hires.
So I think I've made myself clear before, but I just would urge all of my all of my colleagues within the board to take note that this would be a departure from the approach that boards prior to this have taken.
Okay, any other board member? If not, we'll go to next steps. Okay, could you go all the way down to see how many more? Okay, let's go back to the top. And I want board members with the names shown up there to take a look at the wording of what's up there. Just look at yours, and then see whether what's up there describes what you're asking for. All right, and then we'll go one by one. Just make sure. First, the wording is correct, or any of yours is non-missing, and then we'll start from the top.
Should I go ahead?
Okay, please.
Okay. Yes, sorry. So, Ms. Cart, just is that the best way to break it down, or do we have more detail than that by asset class?
We can give you by individual manager. We can give it to you by asset class. All of that information is available.
Okay, I would like by individual. Can we do and by individual manager?
Okay.
That would be
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Okay, let's see what he says. Class and by individual. Okay, so does that capture what you're asking for? Okay, we're not voting yet. We just want to make sure the language is correct. The second one, Corbett Sanders, does that? That works. Okay, third one is Janet. Let's see whether that.
So that is what I would like, but if we are going to agree to Ms. Corbett Sanders' last.
We don't know whether we're going to agree.
I know,
Right.
so let me finish my if
Okay.
statement. If we agree to Ms. Corbett Sanders' last request, if Ms. Corbett Sanders accepts, my question would really be something for the task force to consider, if that is what they would recommend, going that route. Apparently that makes people very angry to use that phrase, so I'm not going to use that. But however, yeah, if that makes sense to you, I think that that's something that needs to be considered by the task force, and I would agree to that.
So just leave it as is for the time being. Is that what you want? Okay. And then we go to the fourth one is Mr. McGarvin. Does that capture what you want? Okay. Again, Ms. Corbett Sanders.
I don't like the word is.
Okay.
I'd rather it say how the fund could be managed.
Could be managed.
And as far as the task force, I presume that it would be a task force with appointees made by the school board.
Task force with appointees to be.
Similar to our task, how about using the budget task force as a model? Does that work?
I mean, that's your language. Don't ask me. That's your next step.
You know what, just take out with the appointees made by the school board, and then we can go from there.
So using budget task
Take
force
out
as a.
using just go back to the, establish a task force to address how the fund could be managed long-term, best practices for managing the fund long-term.
Could it be managed? Okay. I'm just gonna, we're not voting yet, so I'm gonna go to next one. Who's this next one after Corbett Sanders? Is that the last one? So if there's anyone who's next is missing, I had Mr. Narcofax, no? Yeah, Mr. Strauss?
I just have a legal question. It's my understanding that the school board cannot manage, in other
Okay,
words,
we're
we
not,
can't.
okay, we'll discuss one at a time.
But it's just a legal question. It's my understanding that we cannot tell the trustees how to manage the funds. We appoint the trustees. Is that correct? Ms. Quinn, isn't that the way that this is set up?
I think you would want to have a discussion with your legal counsel on what it does to your fiduciary responsibility
exactly right,
if
yeah.
you become involved in the investment side.
That's my
because,
concern.
You've delegated that
Right.
to authority to
By law.
the trustees. You have purchased fiduciary insurance for them and for staff. And if you alter that relationship, I think you should consult with your counsel
Yeah,
on
so I
Then
think
can
maybe
I
the next
suggest
step is to consult legal counsel as to the relationship of the board to the trustees and the fiduciary responsibility, because
Is that your next step you're asking?
well, I think so, yeah, because the board is asking a lot of questions, and I don't know how that
So
meshes with
then
legal.
please give exact wording so that.
Okay, consult with legal counsel regarding
Board's legal authority?
the board's potential legal authority over investment decisions.
Okay.
Can I, based on that, then go in my recommendation, maybe it should say establish a task force to make recommendations to the ERFC board or something like that. I don't know, if there's a concern about how much we can do.
We're managing the fund long-term you want to keep.
Yeah.
So take out address best practices and
Okay, is anybody else is missing? Okay, if not, then we'll go back to the top, and now we'll see where we have a consensus on these steps.
Janie's language, if we're trying to get it clear first before we vote on it. So the board's not trying to have legal authority over investment decisions. We're talking about management of the fund. It's a little different than investment decisions.
I mean, it's a Cheney, so what is?
That, well, I'd like to just leave it like, because that's actually a lot of the
Okay, so let's go back to the top, and then we'll see. Let's go back to the top, very top, please. Very top. Okay, top one, provide detail of fees that FCPS pays, broken down by asset class and by individual manager. Those who support that as a next step, raise your hand. Okay, there's enough support. And the next one, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, so please read. Okay, if they'll just. Okay, if there's enough support rate, I want to see. Yes.
Sorry, can I ask a question? The second part of that, are there savings to be had if we explore? That sounds like a white paper. How much are we asking for here?
Corbett Sanders.
Is there a way that we can find efficiencies by perhaps, efficiencies in our staffing?
So what if we put this, what if we asked, there already are county to schools conversations going on right now about combining, right, finding efficiencies. So finding efficiencies, should we ask to add our supplemental retirement to that conversation? Is that what you want to do?
I think that would be
Okay. Okay, Ms. Corbett Sanders, you want us to modify your language?
How would we do that? Okay. So basically say, take out the one Fairfax approach and just add it to the list of the joint budget dialogue with the county on shared efficiencies. Does that work?
Yeah, I think instead of asking it as, are there savings to be had, just say, add ERFC to joint conversations with the county about efficiencies.
Is that a separate bullet? Yeah, I mean, there's the first piece, and then the other one you're talking about could be.
You can just put my name on there with Ms. Corbett Sanders and get rid of mine.
All right, so you're going to take, okay, and take out that next bullet. All right, Ryan, next one.
Yes.
Well, okay, no. We voted on those. Does anybody have any questions on Ryan's? For Ryan?
Ask your question.
Sure.
When you say to move forward with passive management, do you mean 100% passive management or options for a mix? Options for a different mix, because right now we've got like 30% in passive for some of the funds and 14%. So, well, I ask it because I think a straight up comparison of what we have now against 100% is maybe not as instructive as what if we had a few different options? What if we went to 50% and, you know what I mean? So, right.
Right, and you have to, as we explained, you have to earn the same return as you would in the active. So, I would say there are no savings if you don't have it.
Yeah, you're going to have an increased employer contribution, I think was the point you were making.
It's exactly
right?
the information that Aon already presented.
Right. So I mean, my question is just, can we just get the number? If it's zero, fine. But we need to have that number.
But my understanding is just for next year, not for future years.
Just repeat the number that Aon gave. They showed the.
Yeah, we'll provide the numbers that Aon did and maybe add some additional language to the chart that we had.
Okay, just a moment.
Because we can't go
Wait,
100.
wait,
we
Elizabeth.
We
Go
can't go 100% passive because our asset class is that the passive is not available. So unless we change the entire asset allocation, we cannot go 100% passive.
That's why I thought that, now I don't want to get deep back into this, but I thought that was the comparison that we got in the background documents. And to me, that's not necessarily a helpful comparison because it requires us to lose some of our investments. Do you know what I mean? So if we kept the investments that can't be done as passive investments, keep them, but do more of the other types of investments as passive management.
And you would increase risk. I mean, going to 100% passive in fixed income right now, when interest rates are at an all-time low, the Board of Trustees would not think they were fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility if they did that. They couldn't. You probably wouldn't have a Board of Trustees any longer if you directed them to do that.
I got that. So for the fixed, you're right. But what about the other?
So the only thing that's left then is the equity.
The large cap.
The equity
right.
portfolio.
Right. And we're now at 1/3.
And you just heard today how the trustees, our investment expert talked about valuations and how that would not be a course of action to take today. It could be something that we would consider in the future, but so that's, I think once you take that step of giving the Board of Trustees investment direction, that's when you have to consult legal counsel and see if you want to do that. And then your Board of Trustees is going to have to make a decision on whether they want to continue to serve on the board.
All right, on this issue, I have Ms. McLaughlin, followed by Ms. Schultz.
And just a point of clarity, so, we're looking at Mr. McElveen's proposal here. I know some of us have sort of repeatedly just asked for looking at how the Board of Supervisors, FCERS, is managed. It was my understanding it is not managed the same way that ERFC is. So I feel a little bit like there's some verbal gymnastics going on, and however it is that the county does their management, it's different from what we're doing. And if Mr. McElveen's saying in this question, sort of, let's just get a budget savings analysis of what we're doing, and one example is how they do it, and I know, Ms. Quidden, you're giving me.
I am, because the county does not use a passive investment approach. So to your point, if you want us to mimic the county actually uses more alternative asset classes.
So it's a different
Asset
bullet point.
allocation mix.
So, but couldn't then the comparison be done if we were to do ERFC in a management style the way that FCERS is done? Is there any cost savings and benefit to doing it that way versus what ERFC does now? I mean, at a macro level, they do it differently than we do it. And we are getting pushback from in the community with some people saying how we do it is more expensive model than how the county does it. If that's not true, then we could at least answer that question with Mr. McElveen.
That's not correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys can appreciate just telling us it's not true gives us absolutely no foundation to answer the question.
No, I can tell you exactly why it's not true. They book their investment fees in a manner different than we book our investment manager fees. And so if you try to compare their annual report, their investment fees to ours, they're not an apples and apples comparison, because we record our fees for all of our commingled accounts, which is similar to a mutual fund. We record those, even though we don't get an invoice and have to pay them out, we record those in our financial statements. And that's not a methodology that Fairfax County Employees Retirement System uses. So if you take our $12 million and compare it to theirs, they're not comparable numbers.
Right, but Ms.
And they're
Carr,
working toward making those comparable because they have received comments from their auditors that they should be fully disclosing those fees.
I absolutely appreciate that. And so I'm going to echo my support for Mr. McElveen's that we need that distinction made in writing. Like, in other words, everything you're saying, no one's necessarily going to discount that what you're saying isn't true, but without it in writing for us to be able to explain why theirs looks differently, we've got nothing other than say, well, that's not what our people tell us, and then
We
they
understand
roll their
you,
eyes.
so we've been working with the county's retirement system to kind of help us get to that point. So we do have an apples-to-apples comparison. But unless the county provides that information, we don't have it in writing yet. But
So
we have
then-
been in discussions with the county retirement office to say, can you guys show a true reflection of all the fees so we could have an apples-to-apples comparison? We just have not received that information back yet.
So because they don't report it the same way, you have knowledge that there's more fees involved than they're revealing, but you don't know what those fees are.
Yes, I did talk to the executive director yesterday, and he said they're still working on it, but they are going to be higher than what they've disclosed in their financial report.
Do you have any idea when they think this might happen?
I thought I was getting it today, but I got a follow-up email this morning that they aren't fully done with the
But
calculation.
in the next week or two, they're hoping, right?
Right, I was supposed to get it today. But as Susan said, they don't run a fully passive strategy. They have 35 investment managers. We have 25. It's a more expensive investment program.
All right, I have Ms. Schultz and Ms. Palchik.
I'm not sure I understand the phrase or the implication that if we went to a passive management system, that we wouldn't have a board anymore. I mean, the entire Nevada public pension system is passive. And I mean, so,
And their board agrees with that strategy.
their board agrees with that. Their board agrees with earning a good rate of return and not being, not having an $800 million unfunded liability. Okay.
No, they're not as well funded as the ERFC.
Okay.
And they have an 8% investment assumption rate.
Okay.
So I think, it's hard to make those
I had touched
comparisons.
on something earlier. I don't know if it's an additional next step, but it sort of just hung out there of the why not a COLA, 100% COLA on the CPI capped at 4% for everyone. Why not? Why aren't we doing that? And what's prohibiting us, and isn't that a good idea?
Because again, those are plan changes. We've been taking direction from the board on which groups of employees we were going to impact. And I don't know if you recall, we went through the different groups of employees. We said we had new employees, new hires, non-vested, current, vested, current, and we had retirees. And we were given direction that the board did not want to touch the retiree benefits. And I think we've also heard from the board that they didn't want to touch the vested employees. So when all these calculations were done, they were just bifurcating the new hires with the non-vested employees. So if the board, gives us different direction, that's something that we can look into, but that was not the direction that we have been given so far.
What would be the reason not to have everybody, especially if the county is, to have everybody on a unified COLA with a cap?
I think that's one area you could have the consistency, but then other levels of benefits that are not consistent.
Yeah, but that's what controls your expense. That's one of the major expense controls. And that's the thing that we're trying to control. Otherwise, you wind up with, massive, out of control, unfunded liabilities, and, states have gone bankrupt. We're trying to be proactive here, and we're at a lot of unfunded liability, and the question is, how do we, in the out years, I mean, you're already seeing, and I forgot who gave the calculations in the out years of the increases in contributions. It's unsustainable in the increases in contributions in the out years. So
Schultz, can I remind you, we're on Ryan's next step, and we have 3 more to go, and I understand your concerns, but, you know.
But this was a holdover I'm trying to figure out if this was supposed to be a next step of whether this has to be costed. And maybe that's just the question. Maybe that's just the question. Maybe I just want it costed.
All right, so if you want to add a next step, we'll come to you at the end after we go. So we're voting on Ryan's provide the budget savings if we were to choose to move forward with passive management, taking into account the necessary increased employer contribution. People who are in favor of that.
I had a comment on.
Oh, I'm
question on that.
sorry.
No,
You
it's
did. I had you on
No,
my
it's
list.
okay.
I
No,
apologize.
thank you. No, I think we've got into a few different areas. Coming back to this one, so I guess my question is, well, A, as we discussed, we can only have this for next year. And B, the assumption is only for certain asset classes? Or are we looking for all feasible asset classes? What exactly? I don't know if that's for you, Mr. McElveen. Okay, I mean,
I really
this is
don't want to be that detailed. It's,
Okay,
I think it's a simple subtraction issue.
Okay, so I guess, you know, I'm interested in these questions for the larger kind of long-term task force questions. I think this is more for next year. You want to know exactly if we were to go to passive management as much as possible, what would be the budget savings?
I think at this point, I just want to withdraw this next step. This is ridiculous. Seriously, just delete it. I can get the answer offline. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, and I know there's some people that want to comment on this, but the bullet point where voting, I understand that. Establish a task force to make recommendations to ERFC board for managing the long-term, the fund. Put your microphone on. Microphone.
It's this, for managing the sustainability of the fund long-term. That works.
But in that case, I would like this to be an independent task force to the school board, not to the ERFC board. And maybe you take out the term managing and you just say for an analysis of the fund's long-term sustainability and suggestions on making sure it is sustainable.
Anyone else want to comment on this? Ms. McLaughlin, I think you did. You had your hand up earlier. No?
No, I just have, when Mr. McElveen withdrew his question, I have a simple one I wanted to put in place.
All right. Ms. Strauss and then Ms. Hines.
Right, on that one, I think we would be talking about hiring a consultant. This isn't a citizen task force. We would be hiring an independent consultant to study it and look forward.
I think we have an entire county of financial analysts and people who are well-versed in what we're doing. It's the people who sit on the ERFC board are, appointed by us. We're elected by the constituents. I think that the resources exist in Fairfax County. There's been absolute engagement on this topic. The community is concerned and involved, and I think that we have the resources to create an independent task force. We don't have to listen to their recommendations in the end, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to think we can come up with a task force in Fairfax County that can provide us with this sort of suggestions.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree. I think our employees would be, if we decided to have a thorough study, I think our employees would have greater confidence, and so would the Board of Trustees, if it was an independent consultant. And actually, we already had an independent consultant that's giving us some of the recommendations now. I would not have this be a citizen committee, so I wouldn't agree with that.
I think that the task force has a consultant, but I don't know that we are just solely hiring a consultant to do the work. I think that there should be a consultant that involves that the task force involves, but.
So if everybody, I know Ilyan left, just so everybody's clear, I'm managing this work session now. Please raise your hand if you have questions on the next steps. I appreciate that rather than just opening up the conversation. Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I am worried about this one because it seems like the ERFC board actually is a task force, in a sense, appointed by this board. So I'm worried that it would just be another layer of people. I don't know that they would necessarily, unless I have a lot of details about what this is, I don't know that they would necessarily be any more qualified than the people who are on the ERFC board. I think that if we appoint them, it's going to be very political. And then the ERFC board is going to have this challenge, and we're going to have a challenge of we may have different opinions from the task force. I mean, the ERFC board's job is to analyze and assure the fund's long-term sustainability. That's what they're supposed to do. And I agree, I'm challenged to really understand this. And I do find it helpful when people in the community who are knowledgeable meet with me and talk to me and help me ask the right kinds of questions. So I'm right now comfortable with doing it that way, and making sure that the folks we have on the ERFC board are the best people we could put there. But if we're sure about that, I'm worried about having a task force, and I don't think it would buy us much, and I think there would be risks. I would definitely want to consult with legal counsel before we did something like that, because it sounds like we'd be recreating the ERFC board, and I don't think we can do that.
Ms. Hines, I agree with you, so I won't repeat what you said. I missed that. Ms. Hines, I agree with you, so I won't repeat that. I have Ms. Schultz.
Can I respond?
No. Not yet.
Yes, you can, Ms. Corbett Sanders. I had Ms. Schultz next, and then you can respond.
So the only, I agree that the objective isn't to create an alternate board, but I do think there could be value, Ms. Hines, to answer your question, in having an independent task force look at this. And I'll give you one reason, and nobody's ever said it, so I guess I'll be the one to finally say it, is we have board members on the ERFC Board of Trustees who they themselves are beneficiaries of ERFC. And I think it's a conflict of interest problem. I've never understood why or how you can legitimately, not to impugn anyone's integrity or that to imply that anyone's done anything wrong, but fundamentally, we have people who they themselves are direct beneficiaries of the decisions that they and recommendations they make to this board in the capacity as trustees. And I mean, even under, think about Virginia code, we can't make, pay raises for ourselves. We can only make it for a successive board where we don't, directly benefit. And so I think there's value to be had in having, somebody who is arm's length, who has neither a personal nor an organizational conflict of interest, take a look and provide a separate recommendation to the board. And it doesn't belie our trust in this board, but it does elevate our responsibility to be good fiscal stewards. And frankly, we have a fiduciary responsibility.
Ms. Corbett Sanders.
Mine is a slightly different perspective. My perspective is that when we embarked on this process several months ago, we actually got a letter from the ERFC board saying that there wasn't full support of the approach that was being recommended. Back, I believe that letter came out to each of us within a couple of days of that first discussion. We all received the note. And so all this would do is provide an independent, hey, and I'm not asking for investment decisions to be made by this task force. I'm not asking for anything but a group of people that are professionals in the industry that are appointed by the school board members to make recommendations on how we can ensure the long-term sustainability of our pension funds. And, you know, ideally, maybe we would do this together with the with Fairfax County, because this is an issue that we're not grappling with alone. Every major pension fund or every major organization that has a large pension fund is wrestling with these issues. And we all have our own personal experiences. We may have some views on it, but I think given the limited resources we have, utilizing the resources we have in our community to provide us some extra insights, which is no different than how we address other major issues, such as with the employees' benefits and the budget.
I had Ms. Huff and then Ms. Evans.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. You know, we're a board elected by constituents, and I would, if someone was offering a task force that's going to advise me, which we do all the time, it doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh, I guess you don't need me and walk away. It's because I, as a board member, am looking for an independent, objective view to what I've been doing. And I want to go back to what we discussed earlier about ERFC. When I look at the long-term and the short-term solvency markers in our own ERFC CAFR, it's not looking good. And so I think it's fair to ask for an independent task force that can help unravel some of this. Maybe those are to discuss those markers, to look at the CAFR, to look at the outcomes of our fund, and say, are there other things that we can be doing? It's not a we don't want that board anymore necessarily. It's let's make sure that we're getting the best objective independent given the reports that we're seeing.
Ms. Evans.
So I think this may be an excellent idea. It also seems like a major undertaking. And so my concern is just to put it up here as a next step in connection with this. I mean, we're trying to make a decision by Thursday, and we've been working with specific things, and are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? For the long term, I think this may very well be an excellent idea. I think we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about it in terms of what would this task force look like, who would appoint who. It would certainly take staff time. So while I think I could probably support doing that in the long term and that it would be valuable to us, I don't think that a next step for this particular thing is the way to do it. Just because I do think that it's going to be a fairly involved and probably long-term undertaking. So anyway, that's my thought.
Ms. McLaughlin.
So it's my understanding that George Mason University professor Mark Wachowski is a senior fellow there and is one of the leading pension economists in the United States. We have had George Mason in the past advise us on anything from the advanced academic program. I mean, there's, I'm sure, a number of different ways that if we were saying we wanted an independent review of, again, the long-term sustainability of ERFC, given that we've been told the unfunded pension liability is now $830 million. So we don't have to iron out the exact details, but why I think this matters today is we are looking at short-term next steps and then a longer-term next step. And the board, often we get a topic in front of us, and then we may not see it for another year. So I kind of like the idea that if we even have a very macro level request here, that whether the board is going to come back to the discussion of how best to execute on an independent review of the long-term sustainability of the ERFC, we could then have a separate work session, whether it's this summer or something else, that then formulates out. Is it going to be a task force? Is it going to be asking George Mason's senior fellow to, we'll consult with him to do a white paper on it? I mean, I don't think we have to sort it out today, but I do like that this board is committing to each other and to our employees that we think there needs to be a long-term review and not just walking away from today on Thursday's vote. All along, we've recognized that there's Thursday's vote and then there's long-term addressing the needs of ERFC.
Ms. Strauss?
I have a suggestion that maybe might work better. Instead of establishing a task force, we agree to seek independent advice as to how to ensure that the ERFC pension fund remains solvent over the long time, and then we can decide, because it may be George Mason. I think we need to be a little more thoughtful rather than just say establishing. But it appears to me that there's people would like some long-term advice on this, and agreeing to independent advice, that may be a better way to go, and then we can think about exactly how we would do that rather than trying to solve this all tonight.
Well, the other option is the board is to schedule a future work session to discuss
We could look at
a plan.
possibilities. Yeah, because that would be, yeah. And
that was
let's
gonna-
think about this.
Rather than solvent, can we say sustainable?
Sure, whatever. Sustainable,
But
because that is our concern. We want to make sure that it's sustainable, and we're concerned, so we will.
So, no task force, agreed to seek independent advice to determine how to ensure ERFC remains sustainable over the long term.
Yes, I can support that.
I was actually saying, schedule a future work session to determine how, what review is needed on ERFC and its long-term sustainability. An independent review.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, that does, read that, my colleagues, that is not.
No, it's not.
To determine how to seek an independent review, or just.
Okay, just 1 second before we go there. I want to ask my colleagues at this point, and I think it plays into this situation that Ms. Corbett Sanders is advocating for. I felt because we had this bifurcated session today, because part of our heads were like, we need to make this decision, and part of our heads were in this, like, there is an enormous amount of information out there. My advocacy would be, as Ms. McLaughlin was going down that road, is just to schedule another work session with the group that we had today, allowing us to review this again after, and they will have updated numbers on some areas, because you said some of the numbers couldn't be given until we made a decision on our on third.
That's correct. We can't finish the actuarial evaluation until we get.
Exactly. So we will have updated on that. And then at that point, we can talk about, is it an independent consultant? Is it a task force? What else do we want to do? So I'm throwing that out there. That's not a bullet point. We need to.
I was going to simplify the language.
Okay.
So schedule a future work session to determine ERFC's long-term sustainability. To discuss next steps on.
So the bullet point now reads, schedule future work session to determine next steps on ERFC's long-term sustainability. Yes, ma'am.
This does kind of get away from the original idea of having an independent task force. So if that's the Mrs. Corbett Sanders' advocacy, I wouldn't want to lose that thought here. So I would think that we would want to include that the work session would also consider whether we needed an independent review of some sort, such as a task force.
I think you could put that at the end.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, reading it one more time so everybody sees it and people can hear it. Schedule future work session to determine next steps on ERFC's long-term sustainability and if an independent review is needed, such as a task force.
Or could we say, or a consultant study, so that we get the best.
Or a consultant study. Everybody in favor of that one? All right.
I still think that we need to have a closed session with the lawyer so that we understand the fiduciary responsibility, what power we have, what power we don't have, particularly if we want to, it's important that we understand.
Ms. Schultz?
Because it is complicated.
Ms. Strauss, would that contemplate the, that Attorney General opinion that
I have no idea.
that actually the county is the one that holds the authority over ERFC or something?
I don't know, but I think we need to understand the basic legal structure.
Okay.
between
Well, I'm
us
just saying I would like that Attorney General, Virginia General, Attorney General opinion covered in that. So I'm just,
Okay.
we don't have to put that up there, but I'm just saying.
Schedule that as a
Okay.
closed session, but I think we need that.
Ms. McLaughlin?
So I would like to adjust the language a little bit because I'm not walking out of this room with the public thinking we don't know the very basics, which is we don't have authority over investment decisions. If we just say the board's potential legal authority in relationship to ERFC and just leave it at that, then otherwise we would just look like we don't know how to do our job.
That's fine, but we've never really discussed the details of this. Yeah, and I think that would be good.
Vote, please. All right, that passes the majority of votes. And finally, Ms. Schultz's advocacy to provide details of a COLA 100% of CPI, capped at 4% for all employees. 4.
Not retirees. I didn't write retirees for a reason, just employees.
Oh.
Just for clarification, Ms. Schultz, by details you mean cost and anything that comes with
Well,
that?
it's probably going to be savings, implications.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't feel like writing the whole enchilada.
Got it.
All right, everyone in favor of this, if there's no questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and those opposed?
Sorry, I can maybe support that if it also includes the impact to employees, not just to the system. So both to the employees and to the system.
Actually, that clarifies it because we were not going to provide the impact to the employees, just the cost savings to the system, because that's how we've been running the numbers, right?
Right.
I agree, and if that's what, because all this is going to have to go back to the actuaries.
I would assume that it would, just like the normal, you would include an average employee. So the average employee at, whatever band or whatever years, an average impact.
Correct, but we have to apply it for all the years that they're going to be retired if we're capping it, right? Not fixed. For employees that are going to eventually retire, right? Because that's what we're talking about for these employees. The vested employees, when they retire, my understanding is you all want us to calculate the savings if their COLA was based on CPI capped at 4%. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we did on December 5th, we gave the entire package of changes, including the COLA changes, for all employees except those already eligible for retirement. So that was 20,000 employees, so we gave you those savings.
okay.
So you just want to expand that group to the remaining 1,500 that are already eligible for retirement. But we gave you those numbers on December 5th. And that was with the minimum age of 55. So I guess we need to know if this is going to be a rule of 90.
No, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it for employees that are already eligible for. I'm sorry too. No, I didn't realize that we were already given that.
So that's the December 5th presentation, page 7. We had these 4 changes applicable to new hires, non-vested, and vested employees.
That would have been easier if somebody had said that earlier in the presentation. Okay. You can take it off.
That was minimum age 55.
I don't know if anybody else wants to look at retired employees. Do we want to include that? Because I mean, we could ask for the information, but I just don't think that there's a will.
All right, so we took clarifying question.
So going back to the question that Ryan was trying to ask, the information that Ms. Carr was trying to explain with relationship to Ms. Corbett-Sanders' bullet up there where it says, provide a detailed comparison of like-to-like staffing and costs associated with supplemental plans, FCPS, MCPS, and others across the country. I was trying to ask, and Ms. Carr was saying that she's waiting from the county to find out what their total comprehensive management costs are for their ERS, correct?
Their total investment fees.
Right.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that when you look at that, you would understand that's something we would want to see in part of the comparison, because I want that information. And I know you said that they're supposed to give it to you, but if we don't put it down here, I want to make sure it's communicated. We want that reported back to the board.
Okay, I would report.
Yeah, I think in that second bullet, we should just say, where it says FCPS, MCPS, we should say FCERS.
So how I would answer this question, I would take the report that I just told you that we had done, the benchmarking study, which had 10 peer systems in it. It included FCERS, and it compared our administrative costs for those 10 systems because they are like systems. So I could give you the results of that survey. It doesn't have Montgomery County, but I do know what the Montgomery County staffing is, so I could add that in. The investment fees, those are separate then, because those depend on how large a system you have. But I can give you FCERS investment fees compared to ours.
No, I understand it, but for Ms. Corbett-Sanders' question, when she says like-to-like staffing and costs associated with the plans, I think she means what you just said. It's not just, she wants to know investment fee costs too, not just staff. It's not just the staffing and the cost to pay those employees' salaries. She wants to know the investment fees too.
So I still would give that to you in 2 parts, because the number of members we have that's what drives our administrative costs. Our investment costs are driven by how large our fund is.
Okay.
So the same 10 peer systems aren't going to be in each group.
That's fine. So do we need that question to say like staffing, investment fees, and costs associated? So, I mean, because investment fees isn't listed there. So that way we know we're talking about.
We're done. Or do you need to vote on this one again since you changed it? Let's vote on number 2 again with the change of adding investment fees. Everybody in favor of that? Yes. All right. I thank you for your time. This work session on ERFC is done, and before we move on to the next section, I've had 2 colleagues express that they need to leave within the hour. And this is our budget conversation, and we do have to have something to Dr. Lockard by Monday. We have been here. Well, some of us have been here since 9:30. So I don't feel, this is my opinion, and I will vote my way, and you will vote your way, and I will accept the majority of the board. But I do not feel we are at our best. I do not feel, for some of us, 11 hours in, we should embark on a very important discussion on budget. We voted on this 3 hours ago, but we can vote again. Our alternative time, Madam Chair, would be?
On Thursday afternoon before the regular board meeting, I was thinking 3:30 or 4, probably to be on the safe side, we should try for 3:30, if people can do that. And, if we needed to, we could, push either closed or push the forum. At least that would give us a little bit of leeway. If we get done in 2 hours, that'd be great, but at least that would give us 2 clear hours.
Right, thank you.
Second.
Thank you, but I have a question here next to me, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, hi. I'm just looking now at our meeting for Thursday night. It's going to be hard for me to be here before 5 because I have a conflict. So I'm just wondering, I haven't really checked yet. Do we have forum topics that we need to discuss?
We have one forum topic, it's Mrs. Corbett Sanders, that has been pending for a while. So I think if we get to it, it'll be pretty quick, maybe? No, that's famous last words.
Contract review request, okay, yeah.
I believe that's the only one we have.
Okay,
so far.
and we do have
student cases.
We do, okay. Do we have anything else for closed? Just student cases?
Madam Clerk, no, just, is it 4 student cases? It's four.
Could we do the student cases early, if you don't care, Ms. Hine? Not if you don't care, that's wrong.
Okay, well, just wondering.
Well,
Okay.
the other thing is, the last time we did do the closed after the regular meeting and then came back to do that, so if we start at 4:30, we could, that's cutting it close, I have to say, because then we really are not doing the close before, and we're not doing the forum before.
Ms. Evans, what I was suggesting is we could start with the closed session on the student cases, and those who can make it can make it. So we take that part of the agenda and begin at 3:30 with the student cases.
Okay, and then that would go until, let's say, 4:30.
Right, and that would give time.
That would give us, 2 hours, let's say.
We could do the
Ms.
forum.
Kovacs, do you think that's actually enough time?
Could he actually do the forum then if we needed to?
Well, we were going to do 2 hours, but you see how long ERFC took.
See how long it takes.
I mean, it's just, the reality is.
And on this session, we need to have some consensus around some of these issues. And also to my fellow board members who, we've talked offline, or this is the time to bring your ideas. If they're different ways for saving, if you've used the budget tool. If you haven't used the budget tool, use the budget tool. If you have any other things you've been thinking about, this is the time to bring it to the table. If you haven't brought it to staff yet, I would highly encourage you to do that. You were supposed to have done that by today, but we can work with that schedule. Maybe we can eliminate to see what we can do in 30 minutes with the closed cases, and then begin at
Well, I
4.
guess, yeah, I was going to say, it would be
Really
good
to
if we could
begin
begin at 4, that would give us, and I realize, Ms. Hines, that would mean you'd so if we could begin at 4, if we want to start the closed cases at 3:30, we could do that. Do people want to try that? Or no?
I think if we start, is there a reason why I'm trying to honor Ms. Hines' need to be there, because I think that's fair.
Right.
I mean, even if we started the budget at 4:30, that's 2.5 hours that we could do budget if we could do the closed session before 4:30.
I guess I'm thinking we should start the budget at 4 to give us enough time. It's just the reality is that
I agree.
that we need that time.
Okay, so I'm still willing to do whatever we can on student at 3:30, if those
I'm fine with
people are
that, if
willing
people
to
wanna
make
do
it.
that.
And then that will save us time, instead of having to wedge
right.
it in later.
Okay, so our options before us are continue tonight. We're beginning with a meeting at 3:30 on this Thursday afternoon, which will start with any student cases we have. And then at 4 o'clock, we'll transition to conversation with budgets. So those who can't make it at 3:30, they can come as close to 4 as they can, and 4 to hopefully 6. And if we need 6:30, we'll have that time.
I
So-
need clarification here.
Uh-huh.
So according to today's schedule, budget was going to be an hour and a half. Because we also have another budget work session on, I believe it's Monday, May 1st.
Budget work session on May 1st is when Dr. Lockard, go ahead.
No,
Why don't you
I'm
speak
I'm
to
not discounting that. I just wanted clarity because I hear everything we're trying to accomplish, but I'm trying to understand how did the hour and a half
I'm
we're
sorry,
losing today.
I assumed it was 2 hours, so I was just trying to make up the 2 hours. I
Right.
don't need to debate that.
Ambitious, an hour and a half.
Right.
Right. So, but starting at 4 means technically we've got a 3-hour window before our 7 o'clock business meeting, right? So I'm just worried that we went from an hour and a half to 3 hours of budget time. I mean, we do work up until 7. So I just want to be mindful of what we're trying to accomplish and when, because the earlier we start on Thursday, and we still know there's going to be some work after the business meeting, we're also going to get stale just like tonight. So I'm a little worried about the 3:30 and, I don't understand why we aren't just trying to start at 4:30 and we get 2 hours in and.
Well, we
Because
could do the closed after.
My advocacy at this point is Ms. McLaughlin, I don't want to talk in this session. You know how our closed sessions go. They linger. And I think that's ambitious to think that. My advocacy would be at this point 3:30, starting with closed, transitioning at 4 to 6, 5:30 if that, but it's going to be till 6 because 5:30 would be ambitious, and then moving forward. I
So
understand.
what's at 6 to 7? I think maybe I'm getting lost in
There's a
translation.
forum. There's a forum.
And Ms. Corbett-Sanders, what's your topic and is it time sensitive?
My topic is the board approval of non-professional services contracts, similar to how we approve other large contracts. What are you asking for to do? My request, it should literally take about 15 minutes, which is that in the same way that other large contracts are brought to the board on the consent agenda, that these should be brought to the board as well. And then if there's any concerns, people can ask about them.
Can we vote on that now? I'm not actually kidding.
All right. So, what time? 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock? Okay.
So-
We'll start this at 4
For the budget.
for the budget.
Okay, and closed, are we going to do closed at 3:30 or later? 3:30 closed.
3:30.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, right, and so, right, if we can't do the closed in a half an hour, which is probably pretty ambitious, we've got 4 cases and actually non-renewals as well. Yeah, and
I would like to advocate that we start at 4 and do closed session. I hate that we would squeeze in the student cases and potentially people aren't showing up until 4. I've already begun to read them. I prefer we give it the time and the discussion that they deserve. And I do not agree to the 3:30. To try and get 30 minutes of closed session when people aren't going to get there till 3:40.
I didn't say it had to end. I said you can extend it later.
So I think perhaps we just need to decide now that the close will be after the board meeting. that the budget session will start at 4 so we can give that the attention it
At your
needs.
pleasure, Madam Chair. So
Well,
yes, that'll
but
be fine.
Is that all right with everyone to start budget at 4 and then have the closed afterwards so we can give it the time and attention? All right, let's do that then.
All right, so those, we still didn't vote. So should we continue right now? Or should we do Thursday at 4? Thursday at 4 first. Looks like we got support. Thank you all. This work session is complete. I appreciate all of your time.